Welcome to Storyflix Film, where movies are not just watched in a broken bar, they are experienced. Here, we bring you fast, powerful, and engaging movie recaps, turning full films into short, exciting stories without missing the thrill. From action-packed blockbusters to emotional dramas and mind-blowing sci-fi, we break it all down in a way that keeps you hooked till the end. So sit back, relax, and get ready, because every story here is a cinematic journey in minutes. How the Grinch Stole Christmas is a 2000 Americana Christmas comedy film directed by Ron Howard and written by Jeffrey Price and Peter S. Seaman, loosely based on the 1957 children's book by Dr. Seuss. It was the first Seuss book to be adapted into a live-action feature film, and the second adaptation of the book following the 1966 animated TV special. Narrated by Anthony Hopkins, the film stars Jim Carrey as the Grinch, a misanthropic green creature living on Mount Crumpet, who despises Christmas and the joyful residents of Whoville and sets out to sabotage their holiday celebration. The supporting cast include Jeffrey Tambor, Christine Baranski, Bill Irwin, Taylor Momse and Molly Shannon. How the Grinch Stole Christmas premiered in Los Angeles on November 8, 2000, and was released in the United States on November 17 by Universal Pictures. It received mixed reviews from critics, and was a box office success, grossing $351 million on a budget of $123 million, becoming the highest-grossing film of 2000 domestically, the sixth highest-grossing film of 2000 worldwide, and the fourth highest-grossing holiday film of all time behind Home Alone 2, Lost in New York, 1992. At the 73rd Academy Awards, the film won a Best Makeup and Hairstyling, in addition to earning nominations for a Best Production Design and a Best Costume Design. Carrey's performance earned him a nomination for the Golden Globe Award for Best Actor in a Motion Picture, Musical or Comedy. Plot: the Grinch, a bitter, grouchy green creature who lives in a cave on Mount Crumpet, despises Christmas and plans to ruin it for the hoes of Whoville. After a chance encounter with the Grinch at the Whoville post office, a little girl named Cindy Lou Who learns from several adults that the Grinch was raised by a pair of elderly female hoes. In school, the Grinch was infatuated with his classmate, Martha May Whoville. After the class bully, Augustus May Who, mocked him for his hairy face, the Grinch tried to shave and injured himself. When everyone in class, except for Martha, laughed at him, the Grinch snapped and ran away to live on Mount Crumpet. Determined to try to make things right, Cindy nominates the Grinch as the town's holiday cheermeister. The townsfolk agree, but May Who, currently the mayor, and his aide object. Cindy personally travels to Mount Crumpet to invite the Grinch to Whoville. The Grinch initially refuses, but ultimately decides to go after he learns Martha will be there. At the ceremony, the Grinch participates in various events, and actually begins to enjoy himself and his company, who likewise begin to warm up to him. That is until May Who gives him an electric razor as a present, deliberately reminding him of his childhood trauma. To further humiliate the Grinch, May Who proposes to Martha in front of everyone, offering her a new car as an engagement gift, but the Grinch scratches its door, accuses the hoes of valuing Christmas only for its materialism, and wreaks havoc before returning to his cave. Learning that the hoes are still planning to celebrate, the Grinch hatches a plan to steal all the hoes' Christmas presents, decorations, and food while they sleep. Disguising himself as a Santa Claus and his dog Max as a reindeer, the Grinch descends into Whoville on a high-tech sleigh and starts by going into Cindy Lou Who's house. Cindy mistakes him for Santa Claus, and the Grinch manages to convince her he is just taking the tree to the North Pole for repairs before sending her to bed with a glass of water. After she goes to bed, the Grinch strips the entire town of its Christmas decorations, stuffing everything into a giant sack and driving it to the top of Mount Crumpet. On Christmas morning, the hoes wake up to discover the theft, and May Who accuses Cindy of causing the Grinch to ruin Christmas. Cindy's father, a postmaster Lou Who, defends her, reminding the town that Christmas is about more than gifts and decorations. Inspired by his words, the hosts come together and sing Christmas carols, while Cindy sets out to find the Grinch. As the Grinch prepares to push the sleigh of presents and decorations off the top of Mount Crumpet, He hears the host singing below and realizes that his plan has failed. Struck by the true meaning of Christmas, the Grinch's heart grows 3 sizes, and he becomes overcome with emotions, before noticing the sleigh is about to slip off the mountain into the gorge below, with Cindy atop it. In a feat of strength, the Grinch lifts the sleigh and saves Cindy and the town's Christmas decor. Upon returning to Whoville, the Grinch gives back the stolen gifts and decorations and apologizes. He surrenders to the police, but they decide to pardon him, despite Mayhew's objections, and Martha immediately returns Mayhew's engagement ring and professes her love for the Grinch. After joining the host for carol singing, the Grinch allows them to hold their traditional Christmas feast in his cave. Cast: A sense Jim Carrey as the Grinch, an eccentric, short-tempered, misanthropic, cynical and scheming green-furred creature, who despises Christmas. Carrey accepted the lead role when he heard a tape of a kid's choir singing the song "You're a Mean One, Mr. Grinch." Before Carrey was cast as the Grinch, A. Jack Nicholson, A. Eddie Murphy, A. Robin Williams and Adam Sandler were considered. A. Broken Bar Josh Ryan Evans as the 8-year-old Grinch, in his final film role before his death in 2002. A. Sense Taylor Momse as Cindy Lou Who, Lou and Betty's kind-hearted daughter who wonders if Whoville has forgotten the true meaning of Christmas. In the film, she is 6 years old, while in the 1957 book and the 1966 TV special, she is no more than 2. A. Since Christine Baranski as Martha May Whoville, a wealthy socialite who secretly has feelings for the Grinch and dislikes Augustus for his cruel behavior. A. Broken Bar Landry Albrighta as 8-year-old Martha, the only one in the Grinch's school who did not make fun of him, as she had already begun to have a crush on him. A. Since Jeffrey Tambora as Augustus Mayhew, Whoville's pompous, self-centered, prejudiced and judgmental mayor, who will go to great lengths to get what he wants. A. Broken Bar bin Bookbinder as 8-year-old Augustus, who bullies the Grinch into running away so that he can have Martha for himself. A. Since Bill Irwin as Postmaster Lulu Who, Betty's husband and Cindy, Drew and Stu's father. A. Since Clint Howard as Hobart, the mayor's sycophantic aide and servant. A. Broken Bar Reed Kirchenbayer as 8-year-old Hobart, who took part in bullying the Grinch at school. A. Since Minty Sterling as Claire Nella Who, one of the Grinch's 2 adoptive mothers. A. Since Rachel Winfrey as Rose Who, one of the Grinch's 2 adoptive mothers. I. Since Molly Shanona as Betty Lou Who, Lou's wife and Cindy, Stu and Drew's mother. A. Since Jeremy Howard as Drew Lou Who, one of the mischievous sons of Lou and Betty, twin brother of Stu and older brother of Cindy. A. Since T. J. Thania as Stu Lou Who, the other mischievous son, twin brother of Drew and older brother of Cindy. A. Since Jim Mescamina as Officer Lynn Who, the chief of police. I. Since Mary Stina as Miss Rue Who, the Grinch's school teacher who later becomes Cindy's teacher. A. Since Deep Roya as post office clerk. A. Since Rance Howard as elderly timekeeper. A. Since Vern Troyer as band member. A. Since Bryce Dallas Howard as surprised Who. A. Since Kelly as Max, the Grinch's pet dog and best friend. To play Max, 6 dogs in total were used. Main among them was a dog named Kelly who was rescued from a pound by Ron Howard. The other dogs had their hair cut and dyed to resemble Kelly. A. Broken Bar Frank Welker performs the vocal effects for Max. Welker had previously provided the vocal effects for Maxina the Grinch Grinch's the Cat in the Hat. A. Since Anthony Hopkins as the narrator, Hopkins recorded the entire narration for the film in a single-day production development before his death in 1991. A. Dr. Seuss consistently declined offers to sell the film rights to his books. However, following his death, his widow Audrey Geisel began entertaining several merch deals, such as clothing lines, accessories, and CDs. 12A in July 1998, her agents made a significant announcement: the film rights to How the Grinch Stole Christmas would be auctioned. The terms were stringent as suitors had to be willing to pay $5 million upfront, 4% of the box office gross, 50% of merchandising revenue, 70% of book tie-in profits, and music-related income. In addition, any actor considered for the role of the Grinch had to be of a similar stature to Jack Nicholson, A. Dustin Hoffman, A. Robin Williams, or Jim Carrey. Only directors or writers who had previously earned at least $1 million on a previous project were eligible to participate. Several studios and filmmakers pitched their vision for the live-action A Grinch. A 20th Century Fox, with director Tom Shadyac and producers Dave Phillips and John Davis, pitched their version with a Jack Nicholson in mind for The Grinch. The Farrelly brothers and John Hughes also submitted their own versions. Other studios such as Paramount Pictures and a New Line Cinema were also interested in purchasing the film rights. Universal Pictures, represented by Brian Grazer and Gary Ross, also made a presentation, but all offers were initially rejected by Geisel. Grazer, however, enlisted his producing partner, Ron Howard, to join negotiations. Though Howard was initially uninterested in a live-action A Grinch and was focused on adapting The Sea Wolf, Grazer convinced him to visit Geisel for a pitch. While reviewing the book, Howard became intrigued by Cindy Lou Who's character and developed a vision for a film with an expanded role for her, a deeper portrayal of the hose, and a more fleshed-out backstory for the Grinch. During the pitch meeting, Geisel wanted Jack Nicholson as the Grinch, but Grazer felt that he did not have the qualities that they wanted. She then responded on who he wanted for the Grinch, and he replied that he only wanted to do it with Jim Carrey. In September 1998, Howard officially signed on to direct and co-produce the film, with Jim Carrey cast as the Grinch. 21A John Stamos auditioned for the role, but backed out due to being allergic to prosthetics. 22 It was later revealed that Universal Pictures paid $9 million for the rights to How the Grinch Stole Christmas and Oh, the Places You'll Go. 23A Before Howard's involvement, Tim Burton was approached to direct but turned down the offer due to a scheduling conflict with a Sleepy Hollow. 24. The final screenplay, written by Jeffrey Price and Peter S. Seamana, known for Who Framed Roger Rabbit and Doc Hollywood, underwent drafts before reaching a final version. Audrey Geisel had significant control over the script, vetoing several jokes she found inappropriate, including one about a family called the Whosteins who lacked a Christmas tree and presents. Additionally, she rejected the inclusion of a stuffed Drofiofa the cat in the Hada on the Grinch's wall. Alec Berg, David Mandela and Jeff Schaefer, writers from Seinfeld, contributed to an uncredited rewrite filming and makeup music main article. How the Grinch Stole Christmas, soundtrack. The soundtrack for the album was released on November 7, 2000. 42 It features a collection of music performed by several artists, including a Busta Rhymes, a Faith Hill, a Eels, a Smash Mouth, and NSYNC. An expanded edition of the soundtrack featuring more cues from Horner's score was released on November 1, 2022 on La La Land Records. 43. Release. Theatrical. How the Grinch Stole Christmas was first screened on November 8, 2000 at the Universal Amphitheatre to the cast and crew, as well as others in the industry, including Will Smith. 44. How the Grinch Stole Christmas was theatrically released by Universal Pictures in the United States and Canada on November 17, 2000. Then on November 23, 2000, it was released in Germany, and 1 week later, on November 30, it was released in Argentina, Australia, Malaysia and the Netherlands. Later on December 1, 2000, the film received a widespread release in the United Kingdom, Denmark, Spain, Finland, Greece, Ireland, Israel, Mexico, Norway, Poland, Portugal, Sweden, Uruguay and South Africa. Throughout December, the film would also be released in France, Croatia, Chile, Hungary, Brazil, Japan, South Korea and Russia, among others. Citation needed. How the Grinch Stole Christmas was later re-released in Germany on November 15, 2001. Citation needed. As part of the film's 25th anniversary, the film was theatrical re-released on December 12, 2025. 45. Television. How the Grinch Stole Christmas premiered on television in Apca on November 25, 2004, and aired there until December 25, 2014, with the exception of 2009. From December 5, 2004 to December 12, 2015, it was paired with the animated television special, airing annually as part of ABC Family's 25 Days of Christmas, which later became a Freeform's event in December 2, 2017. During its airings, additional deleted scenes were featured that were not part of the original theatrical, VHS, or DVD releases. These included extended scenes such as Cindy's dad maxing out his credit card on gifts, Cindy inquiring about the Grinch before school, removed on NBC broadcasts, Lou visiting Cindy after she stayed late at school, removed on NBC broadcasts, Augustus asking out Martha while she decorates her house, removed on NBC broadcasts, and extended Grinch scenes in his cave and at the Christmas party. Other added content involved Martha May and Betty Lou competing in the Christmas lights contest, in which it was won by Martha May, the Grinch trying on different outfits, and various moments showing the Who's preparing for Christmas. Since December 25, 2017, A How the Grinch Stole Christmas has aired in Onca on Christmas night at 8:30 p.m. in all time zones except for Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands, which airs at 9:30 p.m. AST, due to NBC affiliates in these territories using the Eastern Time Zone feed, following the airing of the animated television special. However, it did not air in 2022 due to an infla game between the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Arizona Cardinals, and still airing in ABA until July 2023. In December 6, 2020, it aired in OFXA to promote the television premiere of the 2018 animated film of The Grinch. Marketing in summer 2000, a trailer for How the Grinch Stole Christmas debuted in theaters, attached to screenings of Mission Impossible 2. This was part of an agreement between Paramount Pictures and Universal Pictures, in which Paramount agreed to show the Grinch trailer in exchange for Universal screening a Paramount trailer in front of Nutty Professor 2. The Klumps. A second trailer debuted on October 6, 2000, along with the release of Meet the Parents. Simultaneously, Toys R USA launched a massive promotional campaign for the film, transforming their stores into Whoville headquarters with one of the most elaborate visual merchandising displays in the company's history. Stores featured floor-to-ceiling window graphics of the film's characters, and in some locations, 8-foot 3D Grinch-themed characters adorned the entrances. Wendy's also joined the promotion, offering kids' meal toys featuring the Grinch. Additional promotional partners include Kellogg's, Nabisco, Hershey's, Visa, Coca-Cola and a United States Postal Service. 49. To further coincide with the film's release, Universal Studios Hollywood and Universal Islands of Adventure introduced Grinkmas, a holiday event that has since become an annual tradition at the theme parks. Home media. How the Grinch Stole Christmas was released in OFXA and IVDN on November 20, 2001. In its first week of release, it sold a combined total of 8.5 million home video units, including 3 million DVDs and 4 million VHS copies, making it the best-selling holiday home video title at that time. The film became one of only 4 titles alongside Star Wars, Episode I, The Phantom Menace, Shrek and The Mummy Returns to sell more than 2 million DVD copies during their opening weeks. It also achieved the distinction of being the second highest opening week home video sales for any live-action film, following Titanic. In December 2001, Variety reported that the film was the second biggest selling home video release of the year behind Shrek, with 16.9 million copies sold and $296 million in revenue. A Blu-ray/DVD combo pack was released on October 13, 2009, followed by a digitally remastered Blu-ray release on October 13, 2011. The film was also remastered in 4K and released in Ultra HD Blu-ray on October 17, 2017. Reception. Box office. How the Grinch Stole Christmas grossed $265.5 million domestically and $85.1 million in other territories, for a worldwide total gross of $350.6 million. Making it the 6th highest grossing film of 2000. In the United States, the film earned $15.6 million on its opening day. Over the weekend, it grossed $55.1 million, with an average of $17,615 from 3,127 theaters. At the time of its release, It held the sixth highest grossing three-day opening weekend of any film, trailing behind a Toy Story 2, a X-Men, a Mission Impossible 2, a Star Wars, Episode I, The Phantom Menace and at the Lost World, Jurassic Park. 60. Additionally, it surpassed a Batman Forever to secure the largest opening weekend for a Jim Carrey film and set a new record for a Ron Howard's highest grossing opening weekend, overtaking a Ransom, 1996. Upon its opening, the film went on to reach the number one spot at the box office, beating A Charlie's Angels, A Regrets in Paris, the movie, at the sixth die and a bounce. It held the record for the highest grossing opening weekend for a Christmas-themed film for 18 years, until the 2018 animated version of The Grinch surpassed it with $67.6 million. In its second weekend, the film grossed $52.1 million, dropping just 5.1%, setting a record for the highest grossing second weekend for any film at that time. Surpassing The Phantom Menace in total, the film collected $73.8 million over the 5-day Thanksgiving weekend, outgrossing the newly released Unbreakably and 102 Dalmatians. This was the first non-Disney film to top the Thanksgiving weekend box office since Mrs. Doubtfire in 1993. It remained at the top of the box office for 4 weekends, making it one of the only 2 films of the year to achieve this feat, with Universal's own Meet the Prince being the other one. Eventually, the film was overtaken by What Women Want and Dude, Where's My Car? In mid-December, when it was in its 5th weekend. It continued to draw holiday crowds, outperforming another family film, The Emperor's New Groove. Within 33 days of release, it surpassed a Mission Impossible 2 to become the highest grossing film of the year domestically, collecting a total of $216.4 million. The film ended its theatrical run on March 1, 2001, with a final domestic gross of $260,044,825. A Box Office Mojo estimates that the film sold over 48.1 million tickets in North America. The script into flawless, and the middle stretch drags in spots, but it's far from unwatchable. If you're choosing between this and that said, with such an iconic half-hour animated special already existing, it's hard not to wonder why this needed a live-action remake at all. If something works perfectly, do we really need to rebuild it? I'm not furious about it, and I don't hate it. My reaction is mostly a constant, nagging question. What was the reason? This version leans into an origin story. The Grinch is accidentally delivered to Whoville, where he's mocked by other kids for how he looks. Eventually, he snaps, bolts, and isolates himself up on the mountain. By the time the main story begins, has grown into a full-time loner, guarding his silence and routine like it's a treasure. Meanwhile, Cindy Lou, who played by Taylor Momsen, is on her own quest to figure out what Christmas is really supposed to mean. She's convinced that there's more to it than decorations and noise, and she keeps trying to draw out the good in the Grinch and reconnect him to the season. The problem is, has simply not built for holiday cheer, at least not at first. I don't actually mind the expanded backstory or Cindy Lou getting more to do. A long live action take practically has to add material, and Momsen does fine in the role. My issue is more that the added pieces don't feel especially exciting or imaginative. Visually, it's creative and colorful, but it rarely reaches that truly wild, surreal Seuss-like strangeness that is something like the 5,000 Fingers of Drive had. It's polished, but not always outlandish in the best way. Where the movie really starts to click is in the final stretch once the Grinch fully commits to stealing Christmas. That whole sequence delivers what people came for: the momentum, the mischief, the payoff, and the core emotional message still hits, especially through Cindy Lou's family moments and the way the community's values finally come into focus. That's the thing. No matter how you dress it up, that final idea still works. The heart of the story refuses to break. In a way, though, this isn't just a Grinch story. It's a story that uses him as a lens. At first glance, it's his film, but he's also a kind of mirror, the loneliness people hide, the comfort of old memories, the desire for quiet, And how other people's joy can feel like an invasion when you're protecting your own pain. Watching him slowly change in the fascia of warmth and family spirit gives the movie a nostalgic, childhood-like feeling. Simple, sincere, and oddly comforting. It's the kind of film you can revisit not only at Christmas, but also in those times when loneliness creeps in and you want something gently to pull you back. The details help a lot. The small town holiday vibe, the innocence, the playful production design, and a Grinch who isn't just evil, but someone complicated enough to make his transformation feel earned. Those are the elements that make the movie genuinely lovable, even when it stumbles. Of course, a huge part of the experience is Jim Carrey. Back in his peak years, you expected him to go big, especially when he's playing a weird outsider pushed around until he finally pushes back. This is very much that kind of a performance. Like The Mask, he's turned up to maximum volume, frantic, slippery, constantly moving, constantly mugging. It's impressive and it fits the character, but it can also become exhausting if you're not in the mood for that level of non-stop energy. As the Grinch, Carrey is basically a burst of caffeine in a furry green suit, rapid-fire expressions, sharp little sneers, and barely a pause to breathe. Sure, the makeup, effects, and editing are doing a lot of heavy lifting, but still, it's hard to imagine anyone else in 2000 pulling this off the same way. This isn't the quieter menace of the Boris Karloff version. It's something louder, more layered, and more chaotic. Some of that complexity works beautifully. Some of it can make you roll your eyes. Ron Howard's direction is solid, but the movie is so busy, so packed with visual gags, weird side bits, and constant emotion that it almost feels like you would need to rewatch it every couple of years just to catch everything. It's undeniably fun to look at, and it often is genuinely funny. The raw onion obsession gets me every time. But since Jalou's material can drift into syrupy territory and a few moments, especially when she sings, aren't always as clear or effective as the movie wants them to be. The supporting cast adds extra flavor, too. Bill Irwin, Christina Baranski, and Jeffrey Tambor show up as familiar faces, and Anthony Hopkins' narration sometimes echoes that classic storybook tone in a way that feels like a nod to the older version. You can also tell this must have been an incredibly set to walk onto for the first time. Whoville is built for reactions, but it's also smart that Whoville isn't portrayed as a flawless Christmas paradise. Even if it's their favorite season, note everyone in town is kind, generous, or sincere. Some of them are Grinches in their own way, which helps the story feel a little more pointed than pure sugar. So, messy in places, but memorable. Not the definitive Grinch and not a replacement for the 1966 special, but still a colorful, funny, oddly sweet holiday movie with enough heart and atmosphere to make it worth revisiting now and then. I wouldn't call this a bad movie, more like one I can handle on see in a long while. I've only watched it a few times over the last couple of decades, and honestly, it's not something I'd ever turn into a yearly Christmas ritual. The biggest reason it works at all is Jim Carrey. He's loud, energetic, totally committed, and you can tell he's having a blast. Even if his filmography has its ups and downs, here he's easily the main attraction. The problem is that the movie leans so hard on his over-the-top performance, plus the heavy makeup, busy production design, and constant look at these moments, that after a while, it starts to feel exhausting. I wanted to love it more than I did, but eventually the non-stop antics began to blur together and the experience turned kind of dull. Another issue is the tone. Because the story is framed through the Grinch's point of view, that perspective can make parts of it feel meaner than funny, and a lot of the humor lands in a juvenile, try anything for a laugh way. Some jokes feel obvious, and others feel like they're just there to fill time. The movie does have a strong foundation. At its core, it's a solid Christmas story with a message that still works, but the extra padding keeps it from feeling sharp or truly memorable. That's really my main takeaway. It's not awful, it just doesn't stick with me. If I rated it, I'd land around June 10th. A few days later, I'm not left with much besides Carrey was entertaining. That said, if you're not someone who's totally swept up in Christmas spirit, you might relate to the Grinch's sour attitude. the cynicism, the outsider vibe, that whole villain who into entirely wrong thing, and Carrey does a great job walking that line, playing Hema as both a menace and someone you can't help but watch. I actually watched these back to back with the newer Flea animated Grinch, and for me, I'd highlighted the difference immediately. The newer version felt smoother and more enjoyable. Overall, this one feels some messier and more stretched out. Still, even with those complaints, I can't deny that the live-action version has moments that are genuinely funny, mostly because Carrey goes all in. If you like his style, it's absolutely worth at least one watch. Story-wise, it's set in Whoville, where the residents basically treat Christmas like the center of the universe. But just outside their cheerful bubble is the Grinch, a green, hairy, twisted outcast who despises the holiday and has carried that bitterness since childhood. When a young girl tries to reach out and show him kindness, things don't go smoothly, and the Grinch doubles down on his resentment, deciding the best solution is to spoil Christmas for everyone. Even if you've never read the book or watched the classic cartoon, the movie does a surprisingly good job of bringing that world to life visually. It captures the storybook feel, the curvy shapes, colorful sets, exaggerated designs, even if the movie sometimes feels like it has more style than heart. The plot also feels expanded to hit a feature-length runtime, and there are definitely sections that could have been trimmed to make it snappier. The cast outside of Carrey is fine. The child character works well enough, but largely plays the sweet and earnest kid role. The supporting actors include recognizable faces, but with all the costumes and makeup, they don't leave much of a mark. It ends up being Carrey carrying the whole thing, and thankfully, he's capable of doing exactly that. So, overall, it's a bit long, a bit padded, and not as clever as it could have been, but it's still a Christmas movie with a decent message. And it avoids being overly sugary, partly because Carr's chaos keeps cutting through the sentiment. For kids and families, it's an easy seasonal watch. For everyone else, I'd say try the new Euro animated version first and come back to this one when you're in the mood for Jim Carrey doing Jim Carrey at maximum volume. As context, this was the big budget live action take on the Dr. Seuss story coming after the well-known 1966 animated special. It was produced by Brian Grazer and directed by Rona Howard, making it very much a Hollywood event adaptation of a classic. Down in Whoville, the holiday season is in full swing. The Who's are in peak Christmas mode, shopping, decorating, cooking, and basically turning the town into only a giant festive showroom. Almost every Nia is thrilled except 7-year-old Cynthia Lou, who can't shake the feeling that people are getting carried away. To her, it looks like the spirit of fat Christmas is being replaced by piles of fast stuff, loud celebrations, and constant more instead of focusing on kindness and family. High above the tona on Mount Crumpet lives the Grinch, a shaggy, green, grumpy recluse who wants nothing to do with any of it. The town's people are terrified of him and treat him like a legend you don't want to meet in real life. He's bitter, isolated, and famous for having a heart 2 sizes too small, which fits his attitude perfectly. Cindy Lou crosses paths with the Grinch when he stomps into Whoville to stir up trouble, causing a scene in the post office and generally enjoying the chaos. At first, she's frightened like everyone else until he unexpectedly saves her from getting crushed by a massive packaging machine. That moment sticks with her. Instead of writing him off as a monster, she starts to wonder who is he really and why does he hate Christmas so much. Determined to find out, Cinderella begins asking around town. The answers point to a sad backstory. As a baby, the Grinch was adopted by 2 older women who tried their best to raise him with love. Even as a kid, he was strange and intense, but not flee cruel, more like someone who didn't know how to fit in. At school, young Grinch had a soft spot for Martha May Whoville, but he was constantly humiliated by classmates, especially Augustus May, who mocked him for his appearance. Things boil over the year. The Grinch tries to impress Martha. He makes her a gift and even attempts to shave so he won't be laughed at. The effort backfires. His face ends up cut. The class ridicules him and the embarrassment turns into rage. He destroys what he made, wrecks the classroom, and vanishes into a self-imposed exile on Mount Crumpet, disappearing from Whoville for years. After hearing all this, Cindy Lou decides that the town has been wrong about him. She pushes for a bold move, nominating Thea Grinch to be the Whovillians' holiday cheermeister. The idea instantly annoys Mayor Augustus May, who now grown up and still smug. But Cindy Lou doesn't back down. She climbs Mount Crumpet herself and invites the Grinch in person. He refuses at first, but his interest spikes when he hears there's an award involved and that Martha May will be attending. At the jubilation, the Grinch is forced into the role of public guest and judge, which leads to a mix of awkwardness and mischief. He suffers through cheesy traditions, including an ugly sweater, and sits through the town's bizarre Christmas food inventions. But he also enjoys showing off, bending the rules, and taking the competitions way too seriously, especially when it means crushing kids in games like it's his personal sport. Then the mayor pushes things too far. He reminds the Grinch of his childhood humiliation by gifting him an electric razor in front of everyone and tops it off by staging a flashy public marriage proposal to Martha May, complete with a new car like it's part of the deal. The Grinch snaps. He unleashes a brutal speech, calling out how fake and materialistic the holy holiday has become, pointing out that most of this cheer is just future trash that ends up dumped near his mountain home. After that, he completely wrecks the party, destroys the big Christmas tree, and leaves Whoville in chaos. Cindy Lou gets blamed and shamed, but the town quickly replaces the tree and keeps going, almost proving her point that it's more about appearances than a meaning. Meanwhile, the Grinch heads back home, boiling with frustration and deciding he's done with Christmas forever. That's when he notices something. His dog Max with snow on his face looks a little like Santa. And in that moment, the Grinch gets what he considers a brilliant plan. His wonderful awful idea. If the Who's love Christmas because of all the stuff, then he'll take the stuff away and end Christmas at the source. He throws himself into a preparation, a Santa outfit, a homemade sleigh with gadgets, and Max turned into a reindeer with a single antler strapped on. On Christmas Eve, he sneaks into Whoville and starts stealing everything, presents, decorations, food, even trees, moving from house to house like a one-creature holiday disaster. When he reaches Cindy Lou's home, she catches him in the act, thinking fast. He pretends to be Santa and tells her he's taking the tree away for repairs at his workshop, and she, still trusting, lets him go. By the time he's finished, the sleigh is packed and he drags the entire haul back up to Mount Crumpet, ready to dump it off the cliff and finally silence Christmas. Morning comes and the Grinch waits for the meltdown. In town, the mayor tries to blame Cindy Lou again, but her father speaks up and reminds everyone that Christmas isn't supposed to be measured in gifts and decorations. It's about family, togetherness, and love. Then the Grinch hears something he doesn't expect. Singing, not crying, not screaming, singing. The Who's gather and celebrate anyway, even with nothing left to unwrap. The Grinch is completely confused until it hits him. Christmas doesn't come from a store. It means something bigger than the things he stole. And that realization changes him. His heart grows 3 sizes all at once. Right as he transforms, the sleigh begins slipping toward the edge of the mountain. He tries to stop it, but can't until he notices Cindy Lou is on the pile. That turns his regret into action. He finds the strength to lift the sleigh back from the drop, saving both Thea's stolen goods and a life. In the end, the Grinch returns everything to Whoville and admits what he did. He apologizes and even tries to hand himself over, expecting punishment. Instead, the town's response is surprisingly merciful. Officer Holana lets him walk and Martha May rejects the mayor's shallow proposal, returning his ring and making it clear her heart is somewhere else now. The story wraps as a redemption arc. A town relearns what matters. A child's compassion breaks through years of bitterness, and the Grinch finally becomes part of the community he'd spent so long hating. By the time the story reaches its finale, the Grinch finally gives into the warmth of Whoville, joining Cindy Lou and the rest of the Who's for a joyful sing-along and even earning the honor of fast slicing up the roast beast at the big celebration. The film is guided by Sir Anthony Hopkins' narration, and the supporting cast is packed with familiar faces including Molly Shannon, Betty Lou, A. Clint Howard, Hob, Minty Sterling, A. Clarnell, and a whole lineup of quirky Whoville residents played by actors like Jeremy Howard, T.J. Thine, Deep Roy, Rhina Pryor, Vern Troyer, Bryce Dallas Howard, and even Ron Howard himself in a similar role. Of course, the real spotlight belongs to Jim Carrey, so buried under makeup that he's barely recognizable. He fully commits to the Grinch's cranky, chaotic energy, clearly having a blast being nasty, dramatic, and downright ridiculous. Taylor Momsen is genuinely sweet. Also Cindy Lou and Jeffrey Tambor and Christine Baranski fit nicely into Thea oddball vibe. Hopkins' voiceover adds a warm storybook feel that helps hold everything together. Story-wise, Ida keeps the core Dr. Seuss setup intact. A grumpy mountain dweller who can't stand anything festive and decides to ruin a Christmas by taking it all away. The film expands things with extra background, showing more of the Grinch's past and giving reasons, or at least explanations for why he's so bitter. And honestly, most of those additions work. To turn a very short book into a full-length movie, they had to build Ida out somehow. Complaining about new material kind of ignores how adaptations work. Even the later animated version added extra plot for the same reason. Visually, this movie is one of the biggest wins. The makeup work is outstanding, especially Carrey's full creature transformation, and the production design is wild in the best way. Crooked shapes, colorful sets, exaggerated costumes, instantly recognizable Whoville faces and noses. It's weird, playful, and boldly stylized. No surprise, it took home the Oscar for Best Makeup, picked up additional Oscar nominations for art direction and costume design, and won a BAFTA for its hair and makeup work. There's also a fun musical moment with Carrey performing an amusing take on Your Mean One, Mr. Grinch, which feels perfectly in a character. The tone can get a little dark and intense in spots. Some scenes might be a lot for very young kids, but it's also genuinely funny. If you're on board with Jim Carrey being completely unleashed, and I mean fully unleashed, you'll probably laugh a lot. Your enjoyment really does depend on whether that over-the-top Carrey style works for you, because this is him at maximum volume. I went into it without huge expectations and it ended up being a pleasant surprise. Ron Howard absolutely nails the Susiana look and atmosphere, the strange architecture, the expressive faces, the candy-colored world. It all feels like it belongs in that universe. I even heard Tim Burton was considered at only a point. And sure, he could have done something interesting, but it's hard to imagine a version that fits this specific story better than what we go to hear. And a quick note on performances. Taylor Momsen does a great job as Cindy Lou, and it's cool seeing her before she moved on to other big projects later on. But Carrey is the main event. His physical comedy, the non-stop expressions, the wild energy. Iden honestly feels like a role he was built to play. It's one of those performances that carries the entire movie on sheer momentum. At the end of the day, this film has become one of those repeat appearance holiday staples that shows up every year for a reason. It's not perfect, but it's far better than many people give it credit for. It's strange, messy, energetic, and surprisingly festive once it hits its emotional notes. You'll probably end up laughing, and you'll definitely feel that holiday spirit by the time the feast begins. I feel watching How the Grinch Stole a Christmas on DVD, the presentation is honestly a big win. The picture looks crisp and vibrant, the colors pop, and the 5.1 audio brings the chaos and Christmas energy to life. On top of that, the disc comes with a solid lineup of bonus features, especially if you're the type who loves behind-the-scenes footage and wants to see how the crew pulled off the costumes, sets, and makeup. As far as holiday releases go, it's one of the better extras packages I've run into. Now, I know some people had doubts back then. Hollywood is turning a beloved Dr. Seuss animated classic into a huge live-action production. This could go wrong. But visually, It really doesn't. Ron Howard and his team do a surprisingly great job at translating that exaggerated Sue style into a real-world movie without losing the storybook vibe. It's about as close as you could hope to get to the look and a feel of the original, just bigger and louder. And casting Jim Carrey as the Grinch, that's the engine of the whole film. He's perfect as this fuzzy green grump, part villain, part comedian, part a walking meltdown, living above Whoville like a holidaying hermit. Even under layers of fur and prosthetics, Carrey's energy still punches through. The voice, the body language, the timing, it's all him, and it's exactly what makes the movie memorable. Where the film stumbles a bit is Whoville itself. The makeup and styling area impressive, but it also makes many of the Who's blend together. A lot of the film more like background decorations than people you actually connect with. The movie also adds new plot pieces to expand the story, and not all of those additions land smoothly. Instead of the gentle, simple Whoville you might expect, there's more petty drama, a mayor who's unpleasantly self-important, a competitive Christmas one-upmanship, and even a flashback sequence that gets oddly mean-spirited in a way that can feel out of place. The opening stretch works really well. There's momentum, a sense of wonder, and a fun rhythm. But after that, the movie can start to feel like it's trying too hard to top itself. It gets noisier, busier, and more at me. And some scenes drag on longer than they should. A few comedic bits feel more like Carrey riffing than the story moving forward. And some of those moments can be hit or miss depending on your taste. Still, even when it wobbles, the film has bursts of pure magic. It's a weird, colorful, and playful in a way that fits the season. And there are some genuinely great moments sprinkled throughout, even if adult viewers may feel their attention dip a little once the initial charm wears off. One thing worth pointing out, this is often labeled as a kids' movie, but it's arguably loaded with humor meant for adults. A lot of the jokes fly over children's heads, and a handful area a little too cheeky for very young viewers. Not enough to ruin it, but enough that parents might raise an eyebrow here and there. Cindy Lou, who is a highlight, sweet, earnest, and easy to root for, and the costumes and hairstyles in Whoville are a big part of the fun. And having Anthony Hopkins narrate is honestly a classy touch. His voice adds a warmth and storybook charm, and the rhyming narration sounds smooth and satisfying coming from him. Another major standout is the makeup and effects work. The craftsmanship is impressive and it holds up. The Grinch look is iconic here, detailed, expressive, and believable, which is not easy when your main character is basically a walking fursuit. It's the kind of practical work you don't forget. What I also like is that this version tries to explore why the Grinch is the way he is. The old book and the classic TV special give you the essentials, simple, quick, and timeless. This movie expands the Grinch into more of an anti-hero with a backstory. He's still cranky and hostile on the outside, but the movie leans into the idea that there's something wounded underneath. And yes, even if his heart is 2 sizes too small, there's still one in there. In the end, this is a holiday movie that's loud, strange, and consistently entertaining, mainly because Carrey commits to the bit at a maximum intensity. It's the kind of Christmas film that can hit differently as you get older, too. The Grinch becomes weirdly relatable, and the humor lands harder when you understand the satire. For me, it's easily one of my favorite Christmas watches. Messy in spots, but endlessly rewatchable. And Jim Carrey as a Grinch is the reason it works as well as it does. Down in Whoville, the Hassa treat Christmas like it's a full-time job and a personality trait. Their world is warm, bright, and relentlessly cheerful until you remember there's someone nearby who can't stand any of it. The Grinch's story here isn't just a guy hates Christmas. The film gives him a fuller backstory. How he ended up around the Who's, how he never really fit in, and how that mismatch slowly curdled into resentment. He retreats to the mountains, lives like a grouchy legend, and keeps company with his long-suffering dog, Max. Then a small, determined child decides she can fix him because what could go wrong knocking on the door of a bitter mountain hermit during the holidays. Here kindness becomes the spark that sets the plot in motion, and the Grinch responds the only way he knows how, with an elaborate plan to take his frustration out on the entire town. Cast plus a director vibes. It's directed by Rona Howard, and the cast is stacked with the familiar faces. But let's be real, these version lives and dies on Jim Carrey are going absolutely full throttle. The performance is physical comedy, exaggerated expressions, wild linear delivery, basically a one-man blurta of sarcasm and slapstick. What works really well, the visuals area the main course. Whoville is bursting with detail, curved architecture, Kanja-colored everything, over-designed props, and costumes that look like they were reinvented in a fashion lab powered by Christmas lights. The makeup and hairstyling deserve their own awards show. Every who looks like they woke up and it shows festive chaos. Cars Grinch is also a huge part of the fun. His movements, timing, and endless antics are the engine of the movie. Even when the story slows down, he keeps it from going flat. And yes, the movie knows how to stick the landing. The ending still hits that warm holiday note and Max remains the silent MVP throughout where it stumbles, especially compared to the classic. If you grew up with the 1966 animated version, this one might feel louder. The original has a sharper simplicity, quick pacing, clean narration, and an emotional punch that it doesn't need extra noise. The 2000 film is much longer, so it adds a lot more scenes, more gags, more mischief, more Grinch doing Grinch things. Sometimes that's hilarious, but it can also make the story feel a bit busy, like it's filling runtime with the wackiness instead of letting the Korea message breathe. There's also a tonal shift. This Grinch often comes off more like a chaotic, impulsive troublemaker than a quietly miserable outsider, which can make it harder to sympathize with him early on. The heart is there, but it occasionally gets buried under the comedy snowdrift. Overall take as a holiday movie. It's bright, bizarre, highly stylized ride, a more theme park than storybook. The production design is insanely imaginative. The atmosphere is undeniably festive, and Jim Carrey is the reason it's so watchable. It may not have the clean, emotional impact of the minimalist Seuss-style storytelling, but if you want a loud, colorful, over-the-top Christmas movie with a Beagle performance at the center, it absolutely delivers. Pulling a Dr. Seuss world into a live action isn't a small task. You need an unusually sharp art director, someone who can look at that weird, rubbery storybook universe and translate it into something that feels magical and off-screen instead of just loud. What we get instead feels like a very expensive theme park version of Seuss, flashy, crowded, and constantly pushing for a quirky whether it turns it or not. At times it plays like Hook with a different star. Jim Carrey doing the big physical performance where Robin Williams once did, only with more volume and less warmth. If this movie had leaned into softer fantasy and cleaner design, maybe it could have landed. Funny enough, the team behind Casper is the kind of crew I imagine handling these better. Less clutter, more atmosphere. When studios throw mountains of money at a project, it's always strange how often they forget to invest in taste. For decades, the 5,000 Fingers of Dr. Ta stood as a one-of-a-kind oddity. Proof that Susan film can work, but only when the vision is controlled. With Rona Howard steering the ship here, it feels like the industry decided, great, let's open the floodgates. And suddenly, the big screen becomes sus and, except without the elegance that makes Suia special. The movie has bullish. Sure, there's even the confident storybook narration. Anthony Hopkins gives it a strong authoritative voice, but the tone is all over the place. It's packaged for children, yet it winks at adult themes, mocking consumer culture and tossing in jokes that feel oddly suggestive for a family holiday classic. It's like the film can't decide if it wants to be a sweet bedtime story or a loud comedy with edgy side comments. Visually, Whoville is a lot. The sets area massive and relentlessly detailed, so much so that they make the Wizard of Oz look understated. The Who's themselves are designed with exaggerated teeth and turned up noses. And the overall effect is less charming a fantasy creature and more what exactly happened in this town. Some casting choices only add to that impression, and the makeup doesn't help the residents feel like lovable storybook people. It makes them feel like costumed extras trapped in a bizarre pageant. And then there's Jim Carrey. On paper, It sounds perfect. A hyper-expressive performer playing a character built on exaggerated expressions and mischief. In practice, the movie gives him unlimited freedom to go full throttle, and he does. A few wow moments hit and you'll catch the occasional laugh, but the performance escalates into non-stop mania so early that there's nowhere left to go. Before the film even reaches its midpoint, the Grinch isn't mischievous or clever. Has just constantly performing like the camera is a dare. The makeup is also a major problem. It's impressive in a technical sense, but the close-ups are rough. The green prosthetics and heavy detailing don't read as playful. They read as unsettling. Worse, they bury the one thing Carrey could have used to carry the comedy, his face. The rubbery expressions that could have created real character-based humor are smothered under layers of appliance work, so the performance becomes bigger and bigger body acting instead of sharper, funnier acting. The supporting cast doesn't rescue things either. Taylor Momsen is sweet and earnest, but the role asks her to carry emotional weight with mostly a wide-eyed innocence, and it starts to feel repetitive. Christine Baranski has proven comedic skill, but here she seems stuck between the film's weird tone and her character's odd romantic angle. Half the time she looks like she'd rather be anywhere else than inches away from the Grinch. There are jokes, sure, but most of the side characters hover around a mildly amusing rather than memorable. Technically, the production is loaded. Busy sets, expensive textures, constant movement, elaborate costumes, and that a peppy background score pushing you to feel enchanted. But the more the film piles on, the more it exposes how thin the core story really is. The original tale is slim on purpose. It's a clean fable. This version stretches it into a full-length feature by stuffing an extra plot and an origin-style backstory explaining how the Grinch became who he is. Instead of adding depth, it drags the pacing down, especially in the back half where the film starts to feel longer before it ends. It's telling that the screenplay got hammered critically, and yes, the writing took award season lumps for all the wrong reasons. So, even if you want to blame direction or performance choices, the foundation is shaky. The movie is trying too hard to mimic the charm of the classic cartoon while replacing what made it special. Seuss's musical language and the crisp iconic animation with noisy visuals and broad slapstick. In the end, it feels gaudy and overbuilt, less holiday magic and more holiday overload. The makeup is more creepy than cute. The Who's come off like uniform background drones, and the comedy leans on physical bits that rarely match the original story's wit. The animated 1966 version remains the better experience, lighter, smarter, and actually magical. One more thing. Check the credits and notice how many Howard names appear. Rona Howard clearly made this project personal, dedicated it to his late mother, leaned into family themes, and as he often does, gave screen time to people close to him, including his brother Clint. That family angle is only of the few places the film almost finds a heart. And despite everything, Jim Carrey is undeniably talented. This just isn't the movie that uses that talent wisely. If you want to do Dr. Seuss right, this film unintentionally makes the best case for a simple rule. Keep it animated, keep it imaginative, and don't drown a delicate story in noise. After The Truman Show, then Man on the Moon, and now this, it really did feel like we got another front row seat to Jim Carrey leveling up. People sometimes claim the Grinch part is just makeup and mugging, but that undersells what he's doing. Even buried under layers of prosthetics and fur, Carrey still sells a surprising range of moods: bitterness, loneliness, spite, and eventually something softer. You can barely recognize him, yet the performance is unmistakably his. If you have one big gripe, it's the movie's take on the Grinch theme song. The old TV special made that tune feel playfully sinister, creepy in a fun way. The film's version comes off lighter and safer, and it loses the bite the song should have. One of my favorite little moments is a blink and you'll miss a gag where Carrey briefly slips into a Ron Howard-style parody, tipping a cup and doing a director impression. It feels like pure improv that somehow survived to the final cut. And honestly, it's the kind of random Carrey flourish that makes the movie feel alive. Also, a personal note to the man, please retire the butt jokes. I get it. It's a thing, but it shows up enough to feel like a repeating habit rather than a clever punchline. This film is a live-action spin on Drive Seuss' story, following in the shadow of the beloved 1966 animated short. That older version has a classic tone and a sharper personality, and it's hard not to compare the two. Here, the narration comes from Anthony Hopkins, who sounds more detached than playful, as if he's just reading the line as a because he was asked to. Plot-wise, it's the familiar setup. The Grinch lives above Whoville, a town of cheery, elf-like residents who treat Christmas like an all-consuming festival. The Grinch hates it, not just because he's a cranky, but because he spent years of feeling rejected for being different. He's isolated in the mountains, occasionally terrorizing anyone who wanders too close until a kind-hearted little girl, Cindy Lou, who decides he deserves a chance. She even goes around town trying to figure out what people really think of him. When Whoville's big public celebration rolls around, she pushes for the Grinch to be recognized, much to the irritation of the mayor, who clearly enjoys being the center of attention and doesn't want his rival stealing the spotlight. The ceremony, however, turns sour when the crowd laughs at the Grinch and humiliates him. That's the breaking point. Angry and hurt, he decides to get even in the most dramatic way possible, hella sabotage Christmas. So, he dons the Santa outfit and instead of delivering gifts, he sneaks through Whoville on Christmas Eve, stealing everything meant for the morning. There are funny bits in the middle of all of this, like forcing his dog into an embarrassing reindeer costume. Plus a lot of big showy production design. Whoville looks imaginative and packed with detail, even if the visual style can feel loud and overly busy. In the end, the townspeople realize, nudged along by Cindy Lou, that Christmas isn't just about mountains of stuff, and the story slides into its expected moral lesson. Naturally, the Grinch is changed by what happens, and he's finally welcomed into the community. Overall, it's fairly entertaining in places. Cindy Lou's sincerity helps ground the film. Carrey brings energy and the set design is often impressive to look at, but it still plays mostly like a children's spectacle. Bigger, noisier, and more padded out than the original ever needed to be. And if I'm being blunt, this version often feels like it misses the core point. It leans into excess flash, darkness, garish color choices, and constant bits instead of trusting the simplicity of Sissy message. Car's intensity will either work for you or give you a headache. For some viewers, he's the main reason to watch, and for others, he's exactly what makes it exhausting. Taylor Momse is a bright spot, even if the character has that movie-ish child wiser than every adult vibe. If you wanted the story at its best, the safest recommendation is still watch the classic animated special. It's quicker, sharper, and more charming, and odds are you'll leave it in a better mood. If you grew up with the 1966 animated special, itself adapted from Dr. Seuss' 1957 book, you probably remember how sharp its message was. It didn't need extra subplots or complicated motivations to land the punch. When the Grinch swipes the gifts, the feast, and all the glittery Christmas stuff, the people of Whoville still gather and sing anyway. That simple moment makes the point crystal clear. Christmas isn't a pile of decorations. It's a feeling and a shared spirit. And that realization is what flips the Grinch's heart. Ron Howard's live-action How the Grinch Stole a Christmas 2000 takes a very different route, mainly because it has to fill a full movie runtime. Instead of a straightforward parable, this version stretches the story into something much bigger, roughly tripling the length and adding layers the original never needed. Whether that's a good thing depends on what you want. If you're a purist, the added material might feel like clutter. If you're open to a bigger Whoville, there's some fun in seeing the world expanded. One of the most noticeable changes is that Whoville isn't painted as purely angelic this time. The villagers have flaws, social politics, and shallow moments. And in a way, the movie makes them learn the same lesson the Grinch does. That shift changes the whole dynamic. It's not only about the Green Grouch being redeemed, but also about the town getting corrected for how it treats people and how wildly it worships Christmas consumer culture. The film opens with Whoville in full holiday frenzy. Bright colors, constant cheer, A endless shopping energy. In the middle of all that, the Grinch is positioned like an urban legend. Everybody knows he exists, but no one really understands why he despises the season so intensely. Enter Cindy Lou, who's written as the emotional anchor of the story. She's a curious, compassionate, and bold enough to approach the one creature everyone avoids. Her journey, questioning Town's obsession and trying to understand the Grinch, helps steer the movie back toward the original moral. And yes, Taylor Momsen is genuinely impressive here. She brings sweetness without becoming annoying, and she holds her own in scenes that could have easily turned too syrupy. Knowing she later became the frontwoman of the Pretty Reckless makes her childhood performance even more interesting in hindsight because she's so confident in a camera at such a young age. Plot-wise, the movie hits the key beats, but adds a lot of extra connective tissue. We see a Cindy Lou helping her dad with holiday work, stumbling into the Grinch's world, and gradually digging into his history. The story digs into why he turned bitter, how he's been treated, and what pushed him into isolation. There's also the whole social circus, big celebrations, status games, and public spectacles like the massive Whoville event where Cindy Lou drags the Grinch into the spotlight. Some of those expanded sequences are entertaining. Others feel like the movie is just busying itself to justify the runtime. The romantic and social subplot material is very bigger studio holiday comedy, and it's not subtle. You've got the town's pageantry, the power players, the public proposals, and the humiliation factor that fuels the Grinch's contempt. At times, it's funny. At other times, it leans into the kind of exaggerated silliness that will either make you laugh or roll your eyes. Visually though, the film is hard to deny. The Dr. Seuss-inspired production design is loaded with imagination, a curved architecture, candy color details, absurd costumes, and props that look like they sprang out of a storybook. Live-action Seuss is a tricky assignment, and the movie commits fully. Whether you find it magical or overwhelming, it's definitely a distinctive look. But the real engine of the film is Jim Carrey. This is not a quiet or restrained performance. He attacks the role with maximum energy. And the movie basically dares you to keep up. It's broad, it's loud, it's physical, and it's constantly trying to be quotable. Love him or hate him, has the main reason the movie has the cult following it does. If you don't enjoy a Cars style, this film will likely be a long 104 minutes. If you do like him, it's a showcase. Credit also goes to the makeup and costuming because the Grinch designate works shockingly well in live action. The character stays recognizable, expressive, and weirdly charming despite being buried under layers of fur, prosthetics, and heavy facial work. And while we're at it, Max is a scene stealer. The dog's reactions and loyalty add warmth and humor, and he's easily one of the most likable characters in the film. Musically, the score does the job. Playful, seasonal, and supportive of the big emotional beats. It's not reinventing film music, but it fits the tone and helps the movie swing between comedy and sentiment without collapsing. The finale plays out in the way you expect. The Grinch goes full ascend mode in the worst way, sneaks into a Whoville, and takes everything, decorations, gifts, food, even the tiniest symbolic holiday touches. Yet, the turning point arrives when the Tona discovers that the holiday can still exist without the pile of stuff. And once that lesson lands, the Grinch's arc finally clicks. He realizes what has been missing, makes the choice to reverse his theft, and returns not only the stolen goods, but a piece of himself. Overall, I'd call it a solid Christmassy comedy, bright, weird, and packed with a personality. The humor is big, the visuals are bold, and Carrey goes all in. At the same time, it's also the kind of movie I can understand people watching once and then leaving it there because the exaggeration is relentless, and the moral can feel a little sugary depending on your taste. And honestly, depending on how much your culture goes all out for Christmas in the first place. Still, even with its messiness, it's memorable. The movie may not have been universally loved when it came out, but as an over-the-top holiday spectacle with a strong lead performance, it's easy to see why it stuck around. What he can do, write you a fresh original review of How the Grinch Stole Christmas 2000 that keeps the same theme and talking points. Whoville's candy-colored chaos Cindy Lou Sincerity The Grinch, Maxa Dynamic Jim Carrey's elastic performance heavy makeup, prosthetics Ron Howard's production design the childhood bullying subplot the Snowflakey universe musing and the overall verdict here's an original version you can use is in full holiday overdrive and an explosion of pastel architecture curving the rooftops impossible physics and constant emotion that looks like it was designed by a sugar rush toy maker with a fondness for spirals. In the middle of all that cheer sits the story's small but steady anchor, Cindy Lou, whose wide-eyed curiosity cuts through the town's loudest assumption that Christmas is basically a contest of decorations, gifts, and noise. Here a question is simple, but it destabilizes everything. If this season is supposed to be about kindness, why has everyone agreed to treat the Grinch like a permanent punchline and a public hazard? Up on his garbage-stacked peak, the Grinch makes a solid case for hating the Who's. He's bitter, defensive, and openly disgusted by their syrupy enthusiasm. His only real company is Max, the endlessly patient dog who feels like the one innocent creature in the blast radius of the Grinch's bad attitude. Still, Cindy's refusal to fear him. She doesn't romanticize him, but she also doesn't buy the town's mythology starts poking holes in the identity he's built for himself. The film's biggest gamble is letting Jim Carrey go full of Ortiga inside a character that could have been swallowed by prosthetics. Somehow, it works. Even under layers of hair, green silicone and exaggerated facial shaping, you can still see the performer, the elastic timing, the physical comedy, the sudden flips from a menace to vulnerability. The way a single expression can turn a mean joke into a confession. It's a loud performance, sure, but it isn't lazy allowed. Carrey treats the Grinch like a cartoon brought to life and then forced to survive in a real emotional world. And those visuals matter because this isn't just a movie with sets, it's a movie that lives inside its design. Rona Howard builds Whoville as a storybook environment you can practically taste. Cozy and charming on the surface, slightly claustrophobic underneath, also if the town's sweetness has rules you're not allowed to question. The lighting and camera work lean into that contrast, giving the world an inviting glow while still leaving room for shadows at the edges. The makeup work deserves serious credit, too. The Who's can be a little unsettling at first, like adorably creatures designed by someone who's never seen a human nose. But the craftsmanship is undeniably impressive. The Grinch makeup in particular is a showpiece, complete transformation, but flexible enough to let the performance breathe rather than turning Carrey into a statue. There's also that flashback thread showing the Grinch as a kid, singled out and humiliated for being different. It's not subtle, and it can feel like the movie pressing its thumb on the scale. But the emotional point lands, resentment doesn't appear out of nowhere. When the story shifts from a funny villain to wounded outcast, the Grinch stops being a seasonal nuisance and becomes something more human, someone who learned to hate before he learned how to belong. What surprised me most on a revisit is how comfortable the movie is being a little sharp. Beneath the bright colors and slapstick, it sneaks and jabs auto consumer frenzy and performative cheer. And it lets the Grinch weaponize sarcasm the way only Carrey can, half mutter, half flourish, delivered like his allergic to sincerity, but secretly craving it. The comedy is broad, but it's also busy and inventive, and the pace rarely drags because the film keeps finding new ways to animate the space around him. And yes, thinking about all of this happening on a snowflake ice is still a trip. It's the kind of imagery that nudges your brain toward cosmic daydreaming. What if our entire reality is a speck in someone else's storm? The movie isn't trying to be a multiverse manifesto, but the metaphor is there if you want it. Tiny worlds swirling in endless variations, fragile and strange and oddly beautiful. Is the film deep? Not really, but it's far more entertaining than its reputation sometimes suggests. It's a hyper-stylized Christmas spectacle powered by an all-in performance, meticulous visual craft, and a surprisingly sincere emotional hinge. If you've ever felt out of step with the crowd, or if you just want a holiday movie that looks like a candy cane struck by lightning, it's hard not to have a good time. Even the grumpiest viewer might crack a reluctant smile. Carrey absolutely devours this movie. He doesn't just chew the scenery, he mauls it like a hyperactive gremlin with endless stamina, performing at maximum volume the entire time and somehow making it look effortless. And honestly, even when other parts wobble, his cranky, snarling, oddly charming Grinch energy carries a lot of the film on its back. The script can be awkward, the pacing drifts, and every now and then, there's a joke or moment that feels like it wandered in from a different, raunchier comedy. Still, the Grinch's constant complaining and a beastly charisma tend to outshine the flaws more often than not. That said, the movie's vibe is weird. Not just cartoonish, but genuinely off-kilter, flashy, feverish visuals, a stretched runtime, and a tone that swings between sweet holiday warmth and unsettling neon-lit chaos. At times, it feels like an early blueprint for the kind of loud, overstimulated live-action kids comedy that later showed up in movies like The Cat in the Hat, 2003, and Son of the Mask, 2005. That Sammy Bright, almost headache-inducing surrealism. Except this one is clearly the better-made version. Even with its rough edges, it's still a pretty decent holiday watch and for the most part a fitting live-action take on Dr. Seuss's story. How the Grinch Stole Christmas 2000 is the live-action adaptation of Dr. Seuss' 1957 children's book directed by Ron Howard. It's also a bit of a milestone, the first full-length feature film based on a Dr. Seuss book. I've had a strange relationship with this movie for years. I hadn't revisited the 2000 version in a long time, so I went back in wanting to be fair and watch it with fresh eyes. And I'll admit, I'm friendlier to it now than I used to be. But even with that improved outlook, I still have some serious issues with it as an adult, especially comparing it to the tighter, cleaner charm of the 1966 version. Works Ron Howard deserves credit for turning a very short, simple children's book into a full theatrical feature without completely losing the core message. From a pure filmmaking standpoint, the production design is a huge win. Whoville is packed with detail, color, and personality, and the Grinch's mountain home feels like a messy cave lair pulled straight out of a picture book. The world looks crafted, not just decorated. The cast is an author strength. Jim Carrey is the main event, and he fully commits. His Grinch is mean, dramatic, theatrical, and constantly performing, but in a way that fits the film's heightened style. A big part of why it works is the makeup and effects work. Rick Baker's transformation is legitimately impressive, and it's easy to see why the makeup became one of the film's most praised elements. Anthony Hopkins also does a great job as the narrator. His voice gives the story a classic storybook feeling, and it lands in a similar emotional lane to what the 1966 special did with its narration. Tara Urmson as Cindy Lou, who is solid, sweet, sincere, and clearly meant to be the heart of the movie. Jeffrey Tambor is also a standout as Augustus Mayu, playing him with exactly the smug, punchable energy the role needs. And when the movie leans into pure Grinch mischief, it's fun. Watching him mess with Whoville after getting humiliated is genuinely entertaining, and the big Christmas theft sequence has a lot of energy. Some moments still got real laughs out of me, even on this rewatch. Most importantly, the ending still hits. The shift from Christmas's stuff to a Christmas's community works here like Ida always has, and the payoff of Hema returning everything lands emotionally, just like it did in the classic version. What I'm torn on Cindy Lou, who is written in a way that can be hard to buy. I understand what the movie wanted. She is the innocent voice challenging the town's behavior and trying to reach the Grinch. But the way she repeatedly confronts him is a little ridiculous. In real life, that's not brave. That's dangerously naive. Even if he saves Hera early on, the movie pushes her into situations no kid should realistically be in. I'm also mixed on the expanded motivation for the Grinch's hatred of Christmas. On paper, giving him a reason can add depth. In execution, it shifts the story's moral balance in a way I don't fully love because it ends up making Whoville, or at least a chunk of it, look like the real villains, which muddies the original dynamic. What doesn't work? My biggest problem is how the film portrays the Who's. The movie leans hard into the idea that they're greedy, shallow, and obsessed with presents. Like, their whole culture revolves around shopping and status. That angle can be used as satire, sure, but here it's so heavy-handed that Ida starts to feel like the town deserves what the Grinch does. And that's not really the point of the story. The Grinch is still the one doing the wrong thing, and the moral works best when the town's goodness shines through despite the theft, not because they were awful people who needed to be taught a lesson. And the film adds a romance element, Martha as a childhood love interest, which feels unnecessary. The Grinch doesn't need a love story to work as a character. And that subplot doesn't add much beyond padding and a different kind of sentimentality than the story really requires. Overall, in the end, I'd call it an imperfect but entertaining Christmas movie. It's visually imaginative, often funny, and powered by an all-in Jim Carrey performance, plus strong makeup and production design. But the tone is strange, the runtime feels inflated, and as some story additions weaken the simplicity that made the original version so timeless. Still, as a piece of holiday entertainment, it's better than the later neon chaos kids comedies Ida sometimes resembles, and it has a charm, craft, and heart to be worth revisiting. I honestly think anyone with even a little bit of common sense can see why a live-action feature-length take on How the Grinch Stole Christmas was always going to be risky. Dr. Seuss stories are basically built like fables, simple, stylized, and fast. Stretching one into a full movie means you either invent a bunch of extra material or you pad what's already three until it starts creaking. Dr. Seussish, but in the wrong way. Let's start with the visuals because it's harder to ignore. I know what they were aiming for, a real-world version of Seuss' weird curved candy-colored universe. And it can be done. Seuss-inspired live-action designs have worked before, but here it often feels like a theme park set that never stops screaming, look at me, I'm whimsical. Everything comes off overly manufactured and glossy. And the lighting choices don't help. That harsh green and pink glow makes the whole movie feel even more artificial, like it's been dipped in neon syrup. At times I found myself thinking this would have been smoother as full animation because at least they know the exaggerated look wouldn't fight so hard against reality. The tone comedy that lands awkwardly. Another major issue is the humor. There are several moments where the movie goes for jokes that don't feel playful. They feel awkward and sometimes just plain uncomfortable. That discomfort hits harder for me because I watched this as a kid and looking back. Yeah, there are things in here that I don't think belong in a family holiday movie, especially for younger viewers. It's not edgy in a clever way. It's more like, why did they think this was a good idea? The pacing, slow, padded, and weirdly mean. The story also drags a lot. The original book ended the 1966 special moves quickly and cleanly. Setup, mischief, emotional turn, lesson learned. This version adds a backstory and extra subplots, but instead of making the world deeper, Ida often makes it feel bloated. And the Who's outside of Cindy Lou are not charming to me here. They come across as oddly cold, snobby, and kind of creepy. The more time the movie spends with them, the more you start thinking, maybe the Grinch should ruin the's a party. That's not the vibe you want when the whole point is warmth and redemption. Bored moments, but flattened. What really frustrates me is how the film handles the material that already worked. It pulls in familiar beats from the book and especially the 1966 special. Shots, gags, emotional moments, but it often feels like they recreated without the same spark. Even worse, certain story ideas that felt clever and clean in the simpler versions get stretched and simplified in a way that feels like the movie doesn't trust the audience. There are moments where it practically explains the joke for you, like it's terrified someone might miss it. And that talking down feeling is extra annoying because the source material is literally written for children. Kids already understood it. So why does this film act like nobody can? The performances. Jim Carrey gives Ida everything. Maybe too much. Jim Carrey is clearly going all in and honestly has the main reason the movie works at all for some people. He commits 100%. The problem is the film keeps pushing him at you non-stop. After a while, the intensity becomes exhausting, Not because Carrey can't do it, but because the direction and the writing don't give the character in Urdu a breathing room. It turns into sensory overload. More face, more noise, more bits, more yelling, more everything. And the supporting cast, they're stuck doing the thankless work. Heavy prosthetics, awkward designs, and dialogue that isn't doing them any favors. It's like the movie uses them as decorations instead of characters. My takeaway at the end of the day: I don't understand why people love this movie. I really do. There's a big messy energy to it. And for many viewers, it's nostalgic comfort food. I'm genuinely glad Ida makes people happy. But for me, this is one of those rare cases where if someone told me, "You just don't get it," I might be right. Because I don't connect with this version the way others do. I'll always prefer the 1966 TV special. It's tighter, smarter, warmer, and Ida doesn't need all the extra noise to lend its message. So, yeah, How the Grinch Stole Christmas 2000 is an okay adaptation with some memorable moments, but it's also padded, visually harsh, tonally awkward, and far less charming than the story's best version. I guess I'm still kind of a Grinch myself when it comes to the 2000 live-action How the Grinch Stole Christmas. I hadn't revisited it in over a decade, and honestly, part of the reason was simple. As a kid, it genuinely freaked me out. Still, nostalgia and curiosity won. So, I threw on an old VHS and gave Ida another shot. This film adapts Drive Seuss's classic story and was directed by Ron Howard with Jim Carrey buried under layers of makeup and prosthetics as the Grinch. The setup is straightforward. The Grinch despises Christmas and the relentlessly cheerful citizens of Whoville. The movie leans into the idea that his hatred didn't come from nowhere. It's tied to a humiliating childhood experience and being mocked for being different with one of the people from those days like you becoming the town's public figurehead. Whether you buy that added backstory or not, it's the motivation the film uses to explain why he's so determined to ruin the holiday. And ruin it. He tries, he plots, he sneaks, he steals, and he goes after Christmas with full sabotage mode energy, gifts, decorations, even at the town's giant holiday spirit display. But then the story brings in Cinderlou, a young Whoville girl who sees something in him that no one else does. The movie asks the big question: can someone who spent years rejecting joy ever learn to accept it? For me, the biggest reason that this movie works at all is Jim Carrey's performance. He doesn't just play the Grinch. He attacks the role with physical comedy, wild expressions, and that rubber-bony energy he's famous for. There are moments that are genuinely hilarious, especially when the Grinch gets into a slapstick situations and the film slows it down just enough to let the absurdity land. Even when the humor gets loud or exaggerated, it's hard not to admit that Carrey is doing the heavy lifting, and to credit where it's due, the makeup and the costume work is impressive. Carrey is so transformed that if you didn't already know it was him, you might not immediately recognize him. The Who's area also heavily stylized and convincingly brought to life. It's a strange world, but it's clearly built with effort, detail, and a big production team firing on all cylinders. That said, I'm still mixed on the overall experience. The movie has charm and it has a memorable lead, but the tone can swing into kitchen and overstimulation. And you can see why some adults find it less magical than kids do. Here, the movie softens him with "he became this way because people were cruel to him" angle. I get what they were going for, but it can come off like the film is trying too hard to excuse him instead of letting him be responsible for his own nastiness. Personally, I don't automatically feel sympathetic just because a villain has a sad origin story. Sometimes a character is stronger when they're simply rotten and then choose to change. In the end, I wouldn't call the movie a disaster. Ida has real strengths. The craftsmanship is strong, the production is memorable, and Carrey is undeniably entertaining. Ida also has a message that still works. That the holiday can lose its meaning when we turn it into noise, shopping, and performance instead of something heartfelt. In a weird way, the Grinch can feel like a mirror. It's easy to get caught up in the chaos of social media, endless messages, reviews, and stuff, and forget what the season is supposed to represent. Still, if I'm craving a true Grinch fix, I'll probably reach for the 1966 animated special. For me, it's simpler, sharper, and more charming, and it doesn't need extra explanation to make the Grinch entertaining. For a long time, Christmas was not the colorful spectacle we recognize today. Historically, it was a solemn religious occasion, especially in Catholic countries, marked by confession, attending Mass, and abstaining from meat. Fish was the traditional meal, a custom that still survives in my country with codfish on Christmas Eve. Sweet treats and lavish meals were officially forbidden, even if wealthier families quietly bent the rules by paying indulgences. What we now call modern Christmas really began to take shape in the late 19th century alongside the rise of capitalism. Toy manufacturers, food industries, and expanding middle classes transformed the holiday into something more focused on abundance, gift giving, and domestic celebration. Children began receiving presents first attributed to baby Jesus and later to the invented figure of Santa Claus or a Father Christmas. In Spain, gifts traditionally arrive in January with the Three Kings, a practice that arguably aligns better with the religious calendar. In countries like England, Germany, and the United States, however, Christmas gradually shifted away from its spiritual roots and toward consumption and spectacle. This 1980s film explores that very transformation. At its center is a bitter green outsider who has come to despise Christmas not because of faith or tradition but because of the shallow obsession with the gifts, decorations and excess. He lacks the emotional tools to articulate his discomfort and fails to recognize the deeper meaning behind the celebration. Still, what he truly rejects is the hollow commercialized version of Christmas. And in that sense, his frustration feels surprisingly understandable. Through his sabotage and mischief, he inadvertently pushes the people of Whoville to rediscover what the holiday actually stands for. While that outcome is not his intention, it becomes the heart of the story. The Grinch helps the Who's reconnect with the spirit of Christmas, and in return, they help him realize that the holiday can mean more than food or presents. That mutual transformation is what gives the story its charm. Directed by Ron Howard, Who's reputation speaks for itself. The film is technically polished and was both a box office triumph and a critical success at the time. It earned its place as a Christmas staple, even if its popularity has waned somewhat over the years. The pacing is brisk with no real dead spots, and the runtime never overstays its welcome. While the script fulfills its purpose, it isn't flawless. Some jokes miss their mark, and a few narrative choices feel unnecessary. Still, the rhyming narration stands out as a particularly enjoyable element, reinforcing the film's roots as a children's tale. Visually, the movie is striking, filled with bold colors and imaginative sets. The music may not be especially memorable, but it complements the mood effectively. Jim Carrey took on an undeniably demanding role, both physically and performatively. Enduring hours of makeup every day must have been exhausting, but the end result justifies the effort. He disappears completely into the character, delivering an expressive and convincing performance, aided by his remarkably control over voice and physical comedy. The narrator, voiced by Anthony Hopkins, also deserves recognition for adding a warmth and authority to the storytelling. The supporting cast performs adequately, though their primary function is to orbit around Carr's central performance. That said, I've never quite understood why this film needed to exist in the first place. The original animated version was already a near-perfect Christmas classic, charming and effective in its simplicity. Translating it into live action, especially with exaggerated makeup and expanded subplots, feels unnecessary. Casting Jim Carrey initially struck me as an odd choice. While he is undeniably talented, his performance sometimes veers into excess, becoming unintentionally distracting. Some of the newly added dialogue feels overly juvenile, and the expanded relationship between the Grinch and Cindy Lou adds little of value. In fact, it weakens the original story rather than enriching it. The plot follows the Who's of Whoville as they prepare for what they hope will be their most extravagant Christmas yet. Cindy Lou, however, becomes curious and concerned about the reclusive Grinch who lives above the town. Her attempts at kindness are rejected, reinforcing his resentment. Determined to prove a point, he decides to steal Christmas entirely, only to discover that the Who celebration doesn't collapse without material goods. This realization forces him to confront the limits of his own bitterness. Ultimately, this live-action adaptation feels excessive and somewhat unsettling. The heavy makeup, heightened performances, and tonal shifts make it less approachable than the animated original, which was clearly designed for this story's rhythm and message. While it may have its defenders, I would personally recommend sticking with the classic cartoon. If nothing else, this version serves as a reminder of how effective and timeless the Boris Karloff narrated original truly is, returning to television screens every Christmas season for good reason. Dr. Seuss, How the Grinch Stole Christmas comes from the classic children's book, and the live-action version tries to expand a simple, well-loved story into a full-length feature. Ron Howard directs, and Jim Carrey takes on the title role with a performance that's committed, loud, and impossible to ignore. The setup is familiar. Inside a tiny snowflake sits Whoville, home to Thea, whose cheerful, pine-sized residents treat Christmas like the biggest event of the year. Just beyond their bright town lies the Grinch, a bitter green recluse who can't stand their holiday spirit and decides the best solution is to take Christmas away entirely. The film adds more backstory and extra business around the main plot, but the heart of it remains the same. Cinderella, who sees something more than a monster and attempts to reach him in a way nobody else does. The strongest part of the movie is the production design. Whoville is packed with color, odd shapes, and storybook detail. Like the illustrations were inflated into a real place. Even if you're not enjoying the comedy, the sets and visual creativity can be entertaining on their own. You can tell a lot of money and effort is on the screen at all times. Sometimes that's impressive and sometimes it's exhausting. Carrey fits the Grinch physically and energetically, but his style can be a double-edged sword. When he's restrained, he's actually pretty effective. There are moments where the character feels snide, lonely, and oddly human under the makeup. But as scenes go on, he often ramps up into a full wild man mode, and the Grinch starts to resemble one of Carr's broader characters rather than the quiet, grumpy figure many people remember. I also missed how sparingly the Grinch used to speak in earlier versions. Here, he talks constantly. The non-stop wisecracks and ranting can make the character feel less mysterious and at times less funny. The humor is hit or miss. A few bits land really well, especially when the Grinch's misery is treated like a routine and he's absurdly committed to his own self-pity. But if that kind of joke doesn't work for you, the movie may feel like a long stretch of noise, faces, and frantic movement. The camera is always in motion, the frame is always busy, and the film rarely gives you a quiet beat to breathe. That bigger is better approach is probably my main complaint. Expanding a short, clean story into nearly 2 hours means extra plot, extra characters, extra explanations, and the simple charm gets weighed down by the padding. The film is so determined to keep things loud and visually stuffy that it occasionally forgets how effective the original story was when it was quick and direct. Still, my reaction changes depending on my mood. The first time I watched it, I expected something more magical and ended up disappointed. Later viewings were easier because I knew what I was getting. Huge, chaotic, sometimes annoying adaptation that also has moments where it's genuinely entertaining. Some nights it plays as too much. Other nights it's a goofy, watchable holiday oddity. In the end, I'd only recommend this to people who really love Dr. Seuss, enjoy a loud live-action fantasy, or are curious to see how far Hollywood can stretch a small story into a big spectacle. If you want the simplest, sharpest version of the tale, this one may feel overbuilt. But if you go in with lowered expectations and you're in the right mood, you might find yourself laughing more than you expect. Even though the movie eventually lines up with the familiar beats from Dr. Seuss's book, especially in the last stretch, where it leans hard on the original cadence and even brings in Anthony Hopkins to deliver the storybook-style narration. The journey to get there is rougher than it needs to be. The problem isn't the idea of expanding a slim children's tally into a feature film. It's that the expansion mostly lands in the least interesting places. For a big chunk of the runtime, the film gets bogged down in side material, extra Whoville mini dramas that don't add much. Here's so why he's like this. Origin detour for The Grinch and a constant flood of Jim Carrey mannerisms that can feel more exhausting than entertaining. Carrey has absolutely proven he can be brilliant, but here the performance he sometimes plays like the volume knob got stuck at maximum. Instead of feeling as sharp and inventive, the comedy often feels like it's sprinting in place. Lots of motion, not much momentum. And to be fair, it's not only on Carrey. The bigger issue is the script itself. The movie looks incredible. Makeup, sets, costumes, effects, all of it is detailed and imaginative, but the dialogue rarely matches that creativity.